Story 1. The insulae life inside Rome's crowded apartments. You are standing in the middle of Rome, not in the grandeur of the Forum or the gleaming marble of the Palatine Hill, but in a narrow street where light barely touches the stones. The air is dense with the smell of cooked lentils, smoke from olive oil lamps, and the faint sweetness of fermenting figs. Above you rise the insulae, the Roman apartment blocks stacked floor upon floor, an ancient skyline of brick, timber, and ambition. The insula was the pulse of the working Roman. For most citizens and freedmen, marble villas were as distant as the stars. They lived instead in these precarious rectangles of human life, where hundreds of people shared walls so thin that you could hear your neighbor's arguments through the plaster. At street level, shops and taverns kept their shutters half open, selling bread, oil, and watered wine. Above them, wooden staircases wound upward, creaking under the weight of daily survival. The lower floors were desirable, safer, cooler, and closer to the street where life and business flowed. The wealthy artisans and successful merchants claimed these. Those above, in the upper stories, paid less rent but lived with greater risk. Fires, collapses, and the slow decay of timber beams made every night an act of quiet courage. It's estimated that by the 2nd century CE, there were over 40,000 insulae in Rome. Each was a city in miniature, a stack of humanity, smells, and sound. The walls were brick-faced concrete, but their insides were alive. Voices calling for water, children running down hallways, and the endless hiss of pots boiling on small charcoal braziers. There were no chimneys. The smoke curled upward, staining ceilings black and lungs darker still. Inside a single room, because most families had only one, you might find a clay stove, a chest, a straw mattress, and a few pots. Furniture was a luxury. Privacy was rare. Yet within these walls, the routines of an empire unfolded. Men woke before sunrise, tightening their sandals and descending to workshops. Women fetched water, mended clothing, and tended to meals in small shared courtyards, where several families might cook side by side. Life in the insula was communal, noisy, and surprisingly ordered. Rent was a constant worry. It might be paid monthly in denarii, often directly to the dominus insulae, the landlord or building owner. For many, this was a senator or wealthy freedman who never set foot inside. They employed managers villicide to collect payments and supervise repairs, though repairs were rare and grudging. A cracked wall or weakened beam was patched with whatever material was at hand: broken tiles, bits of rope, old planks. The city's building laws, first codified under Augustus, limited the height of insulae to about 70 Roman feet, roughly 6 or 7 stories. But greed often built higher, until Hadrian's stricter laws lowered the limit to around 60 feet. Still, the walls leaned and the stairs creaked. Fires were the great enemy of the insula. A spilled oil lamp, a careless cook, a smoldering ember left overnight, any of these could turn the night sky red. The vigils, Rome's night watch and firefighting force, patrolled the streets carrying buckets, axes, and hooks. Yet by the time they arrived, the upper stories were often lost. Ancient writers recorded entire neighborhoods consumed in hours. The poet Juvenal joked that only the poor live above the 4th floor, because when the building burns, it is they who perish first. But the poor stayed. They always did. For in the insula, proximity meant survival. You lived near your work, your market, your patrons. You heard news from your windows and smelled opportunity in the street below. From the 5th floor, you could look across a mosaic of tiled roofs over the Tiber's smoke and see, just barely, the tip of a temple dome catching the dawn. Consider for a moment a woman named Livia, not of the imperial family, but of the Subura, a real neighborhood known for its tangled streets and tenement life. She rented a room on the 4th floor of an insula near the Argultum. Her husband, a leatherworker, stitched sandals in the shop below. Their walls were lined with amphorae filled with oil, their savings guarded in a clay jar beneath the bed. At dawn, she fetched water from the fountain at the street's end. The line was long and each woman knew her place. Gossip moved faster than water there. Who married, who quarreled, who was taken by fever. When she returned, she poured water into a small bronze basin, washing the soot from her arms before the day's chores. She was, in all likelihood, content. Not happy Rome was no place for that, but content in the rhythm of her days. Above her lived a family of 5 sharing a single room. Below her, a moneylender. To one side, a widowed washerwoman. Each of their lives touched through walls and shared stairways. When Livia's husband's leatherwork was praised, his neighbors heard. When he coughed at night, so did they. The insula made privacy impossible but connection inevitable. At midday, when the sun reached the narrow alley, the walls glowed orange. The smells of cooking lentil stew, onions, cheap fish mingled with the sourness of sweat and dust. Children chased one another down corridors, their laughter echoing like birds in a cage. Occasionally, a senator's litter passed on the wider street beyond, the bearers grunting beneath the weight. For a moment the poor glimpsed the wealthy, and then the moment was gone, swallowed by the maze of tenements. To live in an insula was to balance precariously between safety and ruin. Rent was paid or eviction followed. A loose tile, a leaking roof, or a cracked stair, these could mean disaster. Yet despite the dangers, life endured. It always does. The insulae were not monuments, they were engines of existence. Every brick, every stair carried stories untold of meals eaten in silence, of dreams whispered in smoky air, of love and loss played out above the clamor of Rome. When night fell, lamps flickered in the windows. From the street they looked like constellations, little stars of the human city. The noise softened. The streets quieted. But above, through thin floors, you could still hear life. A child's cry, a whispered prayer, the creak of beams settling. Tomorrow would bring the same routines. The city did not change, only the faces did. And so, as you stand there in that narrow alley, beneath the leaning walls, you might ask yourself, what was it really like to fall asleep in those rooms, with the walls trembling, knowing that by morning the world might have changed, and yet somehow it would remain the same? You wake before the sun, not because of the light, but because of the sounds. Somewhere above, a baby cries sharp and repetitive, echoing through the wood-planked floorboards. Below, footsteps scrape against the stairwell. You can hear the clink of a ceramic water jug bumping against a railing, a whispered curse in Latin from someone still half asleep. This is not a luxurious Roman villa. This is a rented room in a 5-story insula, and waking up before dawn is not a choice. It's simply how the city breathes. In a room barely longer than a single Roman bed, a man stretches his legs beside a cold, dormant brazier. The charcoal is spent. The air smells of old onions and wet wool. The walls sweat moisture from the night's chill, and the wood of the window frame creaks in protest when he opens the shutters. A narrow street greets him barely 6 feet across, with the rising stench of chamber pots poured out before first light. Somewhere, a rooster crows. Elsewhere, a cat fights over refuse. This too is Rome. In this section of the insula, 3 families share one latrine in a stairwell alcove. It's a simple wooden bench with a clay pot underneath, meant to be emptied daily. It often is. The wealthy use chamber pots made of bronze or glazed pottery, perhaps perfumed with mint leaves. The poor make do with what they can. Public latrines exist, of course some quite elaborate, with running water and marble seats, but they are further away and cost a coin or patience. The water situation is no better. A few insulae had piped-in water, but most tenants fetched it from public fountains, called lacus, at the street corners. These were fed by aqueducts, but lines were long, and the water was often shared with animals and laundresses. You might carry your water in a clay amphora or a goatskin bladder, depending on your means. If you were unlucky, or simply tired, you might buy it instead, sold by the bucket from street vendors who made a living from laziness and desperation. On the 3rd floor of a Subura insula, a widow named Turtilla begins her day. Her hands are already rough from years of work, once as a flax spinner, now as a washerwoman. She rents her room for 48 sesterces a month. It has a single window that opens onto a wall. She boils linens in an iron cauldron propped above a small charcoal fire. The room fills with steam and soap smoke. There is no chimney. The soot gathers in her lungs, staining her breath with something thick and metallic. Her fingers, once soft, are cracked and raw from lye. But this is work, and in Rome, work is survival. In the ground floor rooms, always the most expensive, life is different. These rooms are larger, often subdivided into small shops called tabernae. A cobbler plies his trade in one. His name is Felix, and he lives in the back of his shop, sleeping on a cot behind a curtain. By mid-morning, his stall is filled with the scent of leather, glue, and tired feet. Clients come and go, some leave coin, others leave sandals and promises. Rent for these shops is high, but so is the traffic. A well-placed taberna near a busy street or crossroads could generate enough income to support a small family. The merchant might even afford a boy apprentice or a slave. But success is fickle, and a single bad month, a fire, a collapse, or an illness could send a family to the upper floors, or worse, the streets. Rome's housing market was brutal. Landlords held the power. Rent could be raised without warning, and repairs were rarely made. A broken step might stay broken for months. A wall cracked by rain might simply be ignored. The risk of collapse was not theoretical. The historian Strabo writes of buildings falling in on their tenants. Seneca, in one of his letters, warns of living beneath a roof that sways with every breeze. The building materials didn't help. Though the lower levels were often made of brick and concrete, the upper stories were commonly built from wood or rubble bound with weak mortar. These upper floors swayed and groaned. Entire staircases might shift over time, creaking like ships at sea. Ceilings leaked, plaster flaked, but there were always new tenants to fill the rooms. Still, not everything was bleak. The insula was a living organism filled with patterns and rhythms. By mid-afternoon, the streets below would pulse with color and motion. Vendors called out their wares: chickpeas, garum, fish sauce, olives, figs, fried pastries. Children played with knucklebones and nuts. Musicians wandered with flutes. The scent of rosemary and boiled beans floated in the air. A passing funeral might briefly still the noise, a silent procession of mourners, followed by flute girls and perfumers. Then, life resumed. Inside the insula, women wove or mended cloth by the small light that trickled through windows. Some made money by sewing, others by laundering clothes for the wealthier class. Prostitutes often worked from rented rooms near taverns, their doors marked subtly with symbols or inscriptions. Despite the social divide, the insula was an equalizer. The sounds of desire, grief, and hunger passed through all walls. Evenings were quiet but not silent. Roman insulae were never truly still. At sundown, lamps were lit fueled by olive oil, though the poor might use tallow. Light flickered through windows and down stairwells. The city darkened but never slept. The vigils, Rome's firefighting patrols, made their rounds, listening for signs of danger: the creak of beams, the smell of smoke, the rush of footsteps too fast for the hour. And always there was the fear of fire. The Great Fire of 64 CE during Nero's reign destroyed large sections of the city, many of them densely packed insulae. The blaze began, as it so often did, in the wooden upper stories, a dropped lamp perhaps, or a cooking accident. The fire spread quickly. Narrow streets acted like flues, feeding oxygen to the flames. It is said that Nero watched from his palace, singing of Troy. Whether that's true or not, what is known is this: entire neighborhoods burned and thousands were left homeless. In the aftermath, new regulations emerged. Augustus and later emperors tried to impose height limits and fireproof materials, but timber was cheap and landlords were clever. They obeyed the law on paper and ignored it in mortar. To be a Roman tenant was to live inside a system that favored stone and marble, but gave you wood and wishes. Back in the upper room of Livia's family, the day winds down. The children sleep beside the wall. The father counts coins earned from leather sales. The mother carefully rations olive oil, enough for 2 more nights. Tomorrow she'll visit the fountain again. Tomorrow she'll mend a torn tunic. Tomorrow the stairs will creak, the windows will rattle, and the sky above the insula will remain, mercifully, unchanged. For all its hardships, the insula created a life of proximity to one another, to danger, to opportunity. You knew your neighbors. You heard them laugh and argue. You shared more than walls. You shared life. And in a city as vast as Rome, that was rare. Still, you might wonder, what happened when the stairs broke, when the walls cracked beyond repair? Where did the tenants go when the building collapsed, and who, if anyone, remembered their names? It happens quietly at first. A muffled crack in the wall. A sharp groan from a wooden beam that has grown too weary of its load. Dust falling in a thin stream onto a table where a clay bowl still holds the last of someone's supper. Collapse in a Roman insula was not always dramatic. There was no warning bell, no rescue sirens. Often there was only a sudden lurch of the floor, a terrifying shudder in the stairwell, and then silence followed by screaming. The Roman world understood impermanence. It was a city that celebrated triumphs one day and swept ash from the streets the next. And so, when an insula collapsed, and they often did, it was mourned only briefly, repaired rarely, and replaced quickly. The nature of failure. What caused these buildings to fall? Many things. The upper stories were built hastily, with poor quality timber and stone dust mortar. Builders often cut corners to maximize height and occupancy. Tenants overloaded their floors with amphorae, storage chests, and cooking fires. Water seeped into cracks, and weak winter rains could freeze and widen them. Fire scorched beams until they held on only by habit. Roman law was slow to catch up. The Lex Julia Municipales, issued under Augustus, tried to regulate building heights. Later, Hadrian reduced the maximum height again, but enforcement was uneven. Slumlords ignored the rules, and the city inspectors, the aediles, had larger fires to put out, sometimes literally. Wealthier landlords paid fines and rebuilt in secret. Life continued. An especially infamous collapse is recorded by the satirist Martial, who joked that in Rome, the safest way to survive an insula was never to live in one. Even Seneca remarked that the upper floors were so fragile they should come with a prayer. Juvenal, ever sardonic, said it was safer to walk in the street than to sleep in the attic. And yet the tenants came, not out of ignorance but out of necessity. A renter's Rome. There was no city in the Roman world with more tenants than Rome. Some scholars estimate that up to 90% of the city's population lived in rented accommodations, most in insulae. Owning property was an impossible dream for all but the elite. The rest paid what they could for rooms that leaned, walls that wept, and roofs that groaned. The rent market was dynamic and unforgiving. Rents varied based on location, height, and whether you had access to a street-facing window or a shared courtyard. A room on the 5th floor might cost a fraction of one on the 2nd, but you paid the difference in discomfort. Climbing 5 flights of stairs after a day's labor, often while carrying water or goods, was no small thing. If you were old, pregnant, or sick, it could be dangerous. Some tenants paid by the week, others by the month. Many lived on the edge of eviction. A missed payment could mean sleeping on the steps of a temple or under a bridge along the Tiber. There were no formal leases, no tenant rights. The dominus insulae, the building owner, could evict without warning or simply raise the rent until the tenant left of their own accord. And yet in all this precariousness, a rhythm emerged. A world within walls. An insula was not merely a building. It was a society in miniature. Within its walls were lives interconnected by obligation, routine, and need. At street level, bakers rose before dawn. The warmth of their ovens often seeped into the walls, providing an unintentional comfort to those living above. Shopkeepers opened their tabernae, small, windowless rooms turned into stalls selling wine, bread, pottery, sandals, and tunics. Above them, families cooked communally in open courtyards. On stairwells, young boys chased chickens or delivered messages for coin. Festivals brought color. On Saturnalia, the winter holiday, neighbors exchanged gifts, candles, nuts, small clay figurines. Even the poorest households tried to hang bits of greenery. For a few days, the classes inverted. Servants dined before masters and laughter replaced labor. The insulae echoed with joy rare, ragged, but real. Weddings were announced from balconies. Deaths were mourned with chalked doorways and quiet laments. Each resident became part of a collective memory. You knew who lived 2 floors above you by the smell of their cooking. You knew who lived below by the rhythm of their coughs at night. The insula was not comfortable, but it was alive. When collapse came, and when a collapse finally came, when the stairs finally gave out, or a heavy rain broke through the ceiling, the residents often saved each other. Accounts survive of neighbors helping neighbors down precarious stairwells, of water jugs passed hand to hand to extinguish fires, of children lifted from rubble and placed into strange arms. Rome may have been indifferent, but its people were not. In a city that had little space for pity, the tenants of the insulae forged bonds born not of luxury, but of shared fragility. Sometimes, after a fire or collapse, a temporary shelter was erected in a temple's portico or in a public square. Aid might come from a wealthy patron, or rarely from the emperor himself. After the fire of 64 CE, Nero built temporary housing and promised a better Rome. But better Rome was built mostly in stone and not for the poor. The tenants returned to what they knew. Endings that never end. The insulae are long gone now. Most collapsed centuries ago or were dismantled for their bricks. Only foundations remain beneath modern streets. But occasionally, archaeologists uncover a wall a fresco here, a tile floor there, and the life inside stirs again. In Ostia Antiqua, the old port city of Rome, the insulae still stand. Not full, not functional, but their walls whisper. You can walk the stairwells. You can stand where a cook once stirred lentils. You can see where a child may have looked out over the rooftops, dreaming of something more. You may never know the names of these people, the washerwoman, the leather worker, the midwife, the boy who sold water. But they made the city live. They carried Rome not in glory but in daily breath. So as you imagine their rooms dimly lit, crowded, echoing with voices, you might ask, if the greatness of a civilization is built on ordinary lives, why do we forget the floors they lived on? Story 2. The Water Carriers of the Aventine Hill. You are walking uphill slowly. The incline is steep, and your legs burn, not from the climb alone, but from the added weight of a full ceramic jug sloshing gently against your back, balanced on a padded wooden yoke. It is early, just after dawn. Rome is waking up and the streets are quiet but not still. You can hear the distant braying of a mule, the clang of a shop gate being pulled open, and the hollow, rhythmic footfall of another carrier just behind you. This is the Aventine Hill, one of Rome's oldest and most storied districts, and you are a Quariolus A water carrier. Not a glamorous job, certainly not one recorded in marble or bronze, but your role is essential. Without you, the taverns can't open, the bathhouses can't steam, the apartments can't cook, and the washerwomen can't work. Rome's famous aqueducts may stretch across miles of countryside, a marvel of imperial engineering, but it is you who turns that cold mountain spring into something useful, something poured, something sold. And so, each morning, you rise. You descend from your cramped room near the Porta Rodisculana, collect your assigned vessels from the communal storage yard, and begin the long walk to the nearest public casellum, a distribution tank for aqueduct water. Today, it's the one near the Forum Boreum, fed by the Aqua Marcia. The Aqua Marcia, completed in 140 BCE, carries water from springs more than 90 kilometers away, cool, clean, and slightly mineral-rich. The kind of water even the wealthy prefer, though they receive it through lead and terracotta pipes funneled directly to their private cisterns. You, however, wait in line. You shuffle your feet, jug braced at your side, eyes half shut against the light. You're not alone. At the public fountains and spouts, the line forms early. There are slaves and freedmen, tavern boys sent by their masters, laundresses with copper buckets, and fellow Aquarioli water sellers who supply the cities less connected. You all wait your turn. You talk little. The clatter of buckets is conversation enough. Your license is stamped on a lead tag hanging from your belt Publicanus Equi, issued last spring and already flacking at the edges. It permits you to draw and sell water from designated fountains. A modest job, but not unpaid. On a good day, you might make a few sesterces more than a stable hand. Enough to buy a decent lunch and put away a coin or two in savings if you're careful. Your customers live up the hill, mostly in insulae, the creaking apartment buildings with unreliable cisterns and no plumbing. Water doesn't climb easily, even in Rome. The pipes that feed the upper floors are narrow and often clogged. Pressure drops, faucets dry. The poor can't afford private connections, so they pay you. You deliver water in bulk to courtyards, kitchens, and stairwells. The old woman on Vicus Pisani wants only a small jug each morning. The baker at the corner needs 2 amphorae before noon to soak flour for the next day's dough. A tavern orders 4, though they'll stretch it with wine so sour even the flies refuse it. It is not glamorous, but there is power in being needed. Your legs know the path by now, the exact bend where the stones are loose, the alley where the step is missing, the curb where a dog sleeps each morning. You adjust the yoke on your shoulders and let your body move without thinking. The slosh of water is your heartbeat. The weight reminds you that you are working, and therefore living. A city built on flow. Rome was a city obsessed with water. It bathed in it, drank it, prayed over it. By the 1st century CE, there were at least 11 major aqueducts feeding the city, delivering more than 1 million cubic meters of water per day, more than many modern cities. But while the elites bathed in marble-tiled private baths and dined beside trickling fountains in their peristyles, most Romans relied on the public fountains and spouts scattered across the city's neighborhoods. These lacus were where daily life collected gossip, commerce, conflict, and chore. And someone had to move that water. The aquarioli were not engineers, nor laborers in the sense of quarrymen or road pavers. They were small tradesmen, sanctioned by municipal authorities, regulated by weight and volume. Their vessels were measured, their routes often fixed. Some worked freelance, while others were employed by taverns, thermopolia, or even wealthier households with poor water pressure. Their tools were few: a padded yoke, rope ties, coarse linen filters, and most importantly, their legs. The weight of necessity. Each amphora of water weighed over 25 kilograms more when full to the rim. Carriers made multiple trips per day, sometimes in pairs for larger deliveries, walking distances of several kilometers between fills. They were the veins of the city, pumping water where it was needed. In the summer, when aqueduct flows slowed, tempers flared. Water became scarce. Prices rose. Disputes at fountains became common. The aquarioli were sometimes blamed, accused of hoarding or overcharging, though the real issue was often upstream at the source, or in the crumbling pipes that bled water into the soil. In winter, the work was no easier. Slippery streets, freezing hands, clay jugs that cracked if set down too harshly. But the need remained. Bathhouses still steamed, bakers still boiled. Even the humblest family needed water to survive. And so the carriers climbed. A familiar face. You are known on the hill, not by name, always, though some call you Eugarius, for the yoke, but by face and by service. You bring water that is clean, priced fairly, and never sour. That matters. The children wave when they see you. The baker nods, the laundress smiles. You are part of their day, even if only in passing. A quiet figure with strong shoulders, walking between the foundations of empire. Sometimes you wonder who will take your place when your knees give out. There are always younger men, stronger, hungrier, waiting to buy a license and pick up a yoke. You started that way yourself once. The Aventine Hill rises behind you. The morning sun catches the terracotta rooftops. You lift the jug, shift the weight, and take the final steps up the path. A woman in a blue tunic is waiting in a doorway. She sees you coming and smiles with relief. another delivery, another coin, another day beginning. And you wonder, when the aqueducts no longer flow, when the hill is silent and the fountains dry, who will remember the feet that climbed it not for glory, but for water? The arches cast long shadows. Stone stacked upon stone, curving like ribs across the countryside, the aqueducts carry water silently, without haste, without fail. The Aqua Marcia, Aqua Claudia, Aqua Annio Novus, these great names do not roar or rumble. They whisper, they glide. But you, the Aquariolus, know the truth. That water may fall from the heavens and spring from distant hills, but it does not arrive in Rome by chance. It arrives by labor. You don't maintain the aqueducts, that's the job of the curators aquarum, imperial officials with scrolls and slaves and sealed orders. Nor do you design their elegant gravity-fed gradients, that's the work of Rome's engineers, whose formulas span generations. What you do is simpler. You take what flows into the city and make it useful. You carry the final weight. This is your section of the city, the southern slope of the Aventine. It's not fashionable. The wealthy live further west, closer to the Palatine Hill or across the Tiber in Trastevere. But your neighbors are stable, honest, and in need. And water, unlike politics, flows downhill, always downhill. Your route begins at the Casellum, the water distribution tank where the aqueduct terminates. A stone cistern, thick-walled and open to the sky, with 3 bronze spouts protruding from its face. There is a basin, often overflowing, and a low trough where animals drink. This is where you fill your amphorae, straining leaves and grit with a coarse linen square, checking for clarity, for smell, for the telltale cloudiness that means silt or spoilage. You know water, you know its moods. When the rains are heavy in the Sabine Hills, the flow is stronger, colder. When there's been a landslide near Tivoli, the pressure is weaker. You can tell the season by the taste of the stream. Not all water in Rome is equal. The Aqua Marcia is prized for its purity. The Aqua Appia, older and shallower, is warmer and sometimes mossy. Certain bathhouses will pay more for cooler water. Taverns, less picky, care only about the volume. You work by routine. 2 large jugs on a padded wooden yoke, one balanced at each side. On average, a delivery is 40 to 60 liters, enough to fill cooking pots, washing basins, or the shallow reservoirs of an apartment complex. You make the climb up the hill 5, 6, sometimes 7 times per day. You rest only when your knees demand it. But not all work is solitary. The quiet hierarchy. You're part of a small guild, not formally recognized, but bound by agreement and proximity. On your section of the Aventine, there are 6 carriers. Each has their own route, their own clients. You respect each other's work. Occasionally, when one is ill or injured, another steps in, not out of charity, but necessity. Rome has no tolerance for unfulfilled labor. Among the carriers, there is a pecking order. The eldest, Rufus, has worked the hill for 20 years. He no longer climbs, his sons do that now. But he collects the payments, manages disputes, and speaks to the aedile when permits need renewing. You remember when you were new, and Rufus warned you. Never fill from the second spout after noon. It runs too warm, smells of sulfur. He was right. There are others, 2 younger men with stronger backs but less sense. They fill too quickly, spill as they walk, or overcharge the old women who can't argue. They don't last. Rome punishes carelessness. Your yoke is handmade. You carved it yourself from olive wood, curved to your shoulders, with notches at each end to cradle the amphorae ropes. You've patched it 3 times. You carry no weapons, no charms, but the yoke is personal, as much a part of you as your name. Clients and coins. Your customers are predictable. They wait for you by doorways, coins in hand, sometimes already arguing over how much they need and what they can afford. The baker pays regularly, though always reluctantly. The cloth dyer pays in copper and smells of lye. The retired soldier on the upper floor offers salted fish instead of coin you sometimes accept. The widow on the corner pays nothing, but you bring her half a jug each day anyway. It's not about generosity, it's about rhythm. These people know your name. They speak it when you're late. They notice if you limp. In a city that forgets the poor as easily as it taxes them, such recognition is currency. Sometimes you hear things. You deliver water to a popina a low tavern and catch whispers about the prefectus Anani, the grain official, raising prices. You deliver to a bathhouse and overhear that a new aqueduct is being planned, the Aqua Traiana, from the Janiculum. Rumors run like rivers in this city. You listen, you carry, you remember. The unsteady system. Rome's water infrastructure is a marvel, but it is fragile. The aqueducts are susceptible to sabotage, theft, even corruption. Water intended for public fountains is sometimes diverted by private citizens who bribe engineers to redirect flow into their villas. Some install illegal lead taps in the walls of the aqueduct, a crime, but hard to prove. You've seen fountains run dry not because the water is gone, but because it's been taken. Sometimes the pipes burst loud and sudden, spraying a street like a geyser. Children cheer, adults swear, the water is wasted. And so your work becomes more important. When the pipes fail, people turn to carriers. When fountains dry, you are the backup system, legs instead of lead, sweat instead of pressure. You don't wear a uniform. You are not honored with a statue. But when the water disappears, people look for your face. The long return. The sun climbs higher. You have delivered to the tavern, the laundress, the bakery. You've stopped at the fountain for a brief moment to drink one mouthful, no more. The amphorae are lighter now, and you begin your descent. The hill, once a test, now feels familiar. Your shoulders ache. Your sandals are worn, but the weight is less. That means the day is ending. And as you walk, you glance up at the aqueduct high above the rooftops, arching across the sky like a spine. You trace the line of the water, invisible but constant, threading through stone and silence. And you wonder, when Rome's arches crumble and its fountains fall silent, will the world still remember the men who walked uphill not to rule, but to refill a jug? It is summer, and the fountains are quiet. The morning begins the same as always, a slow rise from your sleeping mat, the sting of sore legs, the familiar ache in your lower back that reminds you the amphorae have not grown lighter over the years. But as you approach the Castellum, something is wrong. A small group has gathered around the dry basin. Men and women frown, tilt their heads, and test the bronze spouts as if willing the water to return. Nothing comes. The Aqua Marcia is silent today. No one knows why. Some say a blockage. Others whisper of sabotage, a feuding landowner near the aqueduct's route, perhaps, who diverted a channel. Still others claim a fault in the arch caused part of the channel to collapse. But it does not matter why. What matters is that you are standing in front of an empty fountain with jugs to fill and deliveries to make. For Aquariolus, this is the worst kind of day, not a flood, not a fire, not even a personal injury. Those are challenges of the body. But this is interruption. This is powerlessness. Still, you are not the only one. A younger man, lean, fast-talking, with a chipped front tooth and a too-clean tunic approaches with an offer. I've got water from the Janiculum side. A little pricier, but clean. I'll sell you half a load if you're short. You decline. You know what he's carrying. Janiculum water is often taken illegally, drawn from private cisterns or illegally tapped piscine. If you deliver it and a customer falls ill, the blame will rest on your shoulders. Instead, you wait. Rome is nothing if not patient in its suffering. Eventually, word spreads that water is still flowing to the southern fountains near the Aventine's base. It will mean an extra hour on foot, and twice the climb to return, but it is better than nothing. You adjust your yoke, nod to a fellow carrier, and set off. The sun is higher now, and the stones on the road are hot to the touch. Adaptation as a trade. This is not new. For all its architectural glory and imperial pride, Rome is a city of breakdown. Pipes crack, cisterns clog, edicts are issued, then ignored. The water infrastructure is a marvel, yes, but it is maintained by fallible hands and vulnerable to heat, politics, and theft. You've worked through other shortages. During the drought 2 summers ago, you carried water all the way from the Tiber's riverbank, not clean water, but filtered through linen and boiled before delivery. It smelled of silt and weeds, but no one complained. They were thirsty. Another time, after a mudslide near Tivoli, the aqueduct was choked for 5 days. You helped Rufus and his sons clean the local reservoir basin with iron scrapers and buckets. The city never thanked you, but the water returned. This too shall pass. Water and memory. You think of those who came before you. The earliest acquarioli may have carried water from the Tiber, even before aqueducts spiderwebbed across Italy. You imagine them barefoot, burdened, winding through Rome's early streets with redraped jugs and sloshing shoulders. Their names are gone, but their labor is your inheritance. And what of those who will come after? You've seen boys watching you work, some with interest, some with pity. They'll take your place in time. Their yokes will be smoother, perhaps, their routes different, but their purpose will echo yours. Even if the aqueducts fall, water will still be carried, by hands on backs, in any city that thrives. A silent achievement. By afternoon, your jugs are filled. The fountain at the Aventine base is crowded, but the flow is steady. You wait your turn, tie the amphory tight, and begin the long walk back uphill. The streets are busier now. A procession passes near the temple of Diana, musicians, flutists, some minor official flanked by attendants. You step aside, unnoticed. The city rarely sees its own lifeblood. But as you reach the crest of the hill, a woman calls your name from a second-story window. "Water," she asks, hopeful. You nod. "2 amphorae." She smiles. "Yes, and maybe a third for tomorrow in case." You deliver. You collect the coins. You breathe. The city moves on. Temples shine, senators speak, slaves labor, bakers shout from their stalls. But beneath it all, behind the scenes and under the arches, the rhythm of water continues. And in that rhythm is a truth more enduring than stone. Civilizations rise not on glory, but on what flows quietly between the cracks. Story 3. Bakers before dawn, the heat beneath the empire. The city is asleep mostly, but beneath its streets, under the humming insulae, the cool cobbled alleys, the quiet basilica's fire is already awake. You are a Roman baker, a pister, and your world begins in darkness. Before the forum awakens, before senators gather or bathhouses open, before the clang of morning pots or the cry of street hawkers, you are kneeling beside flame. Your shop is modest, half submerged at the base of an apartment block. Above you live 10 families. They will eat your bread before they see the sky. The fire has already been burning for an hour. It must reach the right heat, not too hot, or the outer crust will blacken before the dough is set. Not too cool, or the loaves will sag and pale. You've learned to judge by feel, by scent, by how the stones glow in the half-light. There is no clock. Time is marked by routine, by heat, by hunger. Your hands are already dusted with flour. The dough prepared last night and rested in wide, shallow baskets waits on the long wooden counter. It is soft, sour, still slightly warm. The yeast you use is old, cultivated from previous batches and passed down from your father's hands to yours. It is not measured, it is lived. Your apprentices, younger boys with flour-smudged faces and sandals worn smooth, move quietly around you. They know the rhythm: knead, shape, score, repeat. There is no room for error. A batch ruined by poor handling is coin lost. No customer tolerates underbaked loaves. Rome and its bread. Bread is the great constant of Roman life. More than wine, more than oil, it is the city's true foundation. There are over 300 commercial bakeries in Rome by the late 1st century CE. many of them operating in rooms like yours, smoky, warm, and full of motion. Rich and poor eat bread alike, but not the same kind. The wealthy prefer white bread, soft, fine, sifted multiple times to remove the bran. They purchase it from elite bakeries or receive it from household slaves trained in baking arts. The poor eat coarse loaves, dense, dark, rich in bran and stone-ground fragments. This is your specialty, the bread of the alley, the apartment, the workman's lunch. It is not refined, but it feeds. Most loaves are panis quadratus, round with a scored top and deep cuts that make them easy to break apart, 8 wedges like a wheel. Other forms exist too, flatbreads for wrapping, small rolls for dipping in wine, even loaves stamped with symbols of the bakery or the patron. Some are flavored with fennel or honey or dusted with poppy seeds, but not in your shop. Your bread is plain, honest, necessary. Heat and hierarchy. The oven is central, a great domed construction of brick and volcanic stone, lined with flat tiles and fed with wood gathered from the outskirts of the city. It takes hours to heat. You do not leave it unattended. Your life and the building above you depend on its containment. Fires have consumed whole neighborhoods in Rome, always beginning in places like yours. A dropped ember, a cracked wall, a stack of firewood left too close to the coals. That is why the fire marshal, one of the vigils, stops by twice a month. He checks the oven's frame, feels for loose stones, sniffs the air for danger. You nod respectfully when he comes. You offer a free loaf. It is tradition. Your oven is hot now. You test the floor by tossing a pinch of flour onto the tiles. It darkens slowly, evenly. Perfect. The boys begin to load the loaves using wooden peels, long-handled paddles, shaped smooth by years of ash and use. They slide the dough in carefully, avoiding the back wall where the heat is too intense. Each loaf has been marked with your stamp, a clay seal with the image of a sheaf of wheat. This is not vanity. It is regulation. Under Augustus, all commercial loaves must be marked by their baker, especially those intended for sale to the public or the state. The state buys a lot of bread. The grain dole. You are not just a baker. You are part of the Roman food system, the cura annani, that massive operation that feeds the city's population, some 1 million people at its height. Every month, thousands of citizens, mostly poor, registered adult males, receive free grain from the state as part of the annona, the grain dole. This grain, usually imported from Egypt or North Africa, is distributed in bulk, sacks of coarse flour or whole grain, depending on the era. Some citizens bake their own bread at home, but many, especially the elderly, the laborers, the infirm, bring the grain to bakeries like yours. You bake their flour into loaves, charging only for the labor or sometimes bartering for goods. On busy days, you might bake for 30 households before noon. There are also contracts. The state contracts hundreds of bakers to prepare standardized loaves for soldiers, workers, and the urban poor. Your bakery has no contract yet, but you hope for one. It would mean more work, more heat, more wood, but also stability. Bread is power in Rome. When the grain supply is interrupted by storms, war, or corruption, the city grows restless. Riots have begun over bread. Even emperors fear empty stomachs. And yet bread remains ordinary, boring even. It is not luxury, it is life. Dawn and delivery. By the time the sun is rising above the Capitoline, your first batch is nearly finished. The scent in the bakery is deep, nutty, yeasty, warm. It fills your lungs and clings to your tunic. Your face is slick with sweat, your arms coated in a thin sheen of flour paste. The boys open the shutters. The light streams in, catching dust in the air like ash in a sunbeam. The customers arrive quickly, women with baskets, slaves sent on errands, old men with coin pouches hanging from their belts. You greet them briefly. There is little time for talk. Each loaf is handed over, marked by stamp, warm and wrapped in cloth or tucked under an arm. You take coin, nod thanks, and return to the oven. The second batch must begin. The day is young, but the work is never done. As you knead the next round of dough, your hands moving with muscle memory more than thought, you wonder. When a city lives on something so simple, who will remember the ones who rose before it did to make sure the bread was warm and the hunger was met? By mid-morning, your bakery is a furnace. The oven has been hot since before first light, and the second batch is baking steadily. Heat radiates off the stone floor. The air is thick with the mingled scent of flour, smoke, and rising dough. Your tunic clings to your back. The boys, two apprentices, not yet old enough for citizenship, work in silence now, rhythm replaced by fatigue. A loaf cracks audibly as its crust splits in the heat. That's good. It means the fire is strong, the steam inside active. You nod and reach for the next round of dough, pressing it into shape with practiced hands. This is what the rest of Rome will never know. Baking is not peaceful. It is tension, control. The oven doesn't just cook, it tests. Too hot and the bread will be bitter and black. Too cool and it will fall in the middle spongy and underdone. You must adjust the fire constantly, not by flame but by ash. Ash is your real medium. You shovel it to the sides when you need more heat, drag it forward when you need less. You scrape it smooth like a sand garden, reading its signs, its tones. The ash speaks to you. White and dry means it's too old. Gray and soft means it's ready. The oven's dome is shaped to draw heat upward and circulate it in a slow roll. It was designed long ago, probably by a Greek freedman who worked for a patrician household. You don't know his name, but you use his wisdom every day. Beneath the insulae. Your bakery is below street level, not uncommon in the poorer districts of Rome. The insulae above are tall and packed with tenants. Your oven shares a wall with their cellar cistern. Occasionally, the two systems interfere. Last year, a crack in the cistern wall seeped water into your storeroom. You had to throw out 3 sacks of flour. The landlord didn't compensate you. He shrugged and said, "That's why your rent is so low." You said nothing. You could not afford to say otherwise. But the location has its advantages. The foot traffic is good. Your bakery is on a minor street near the Vicus Eugarius, close enough to the Forum for businessmen to stop by on their way to legal appointments. You sell small travel loaves, panis militaris, durable, dry, designed to last for days. These you stamp with a different mark, crossed bundles of grain encircled by a rope. It is your own symbol. You invented it 5 years ago and had it carved into a clay disc by a potter friend. Customers like the stamp. It gives the bread credibility. In Rome, even bread wears a brand. A day in the flour. After the second batch, you clean. The boys scrape ash and soot from the oven's mouth. One of them drops the peel. You say nothing. He's exhausted. You are too. You sweep the floor, collect broken crusts, wipe the wooden bench with a damp cloth. The mixing basin is stained gray from years of dough. You leave it unwashed. The yeast lives there. You kneel beside your flour chest, removing the lid to inspect the supply. Still a third left. Enough for the next batch. If the grain ship arrives today from Puteoli, there may be more flour tomorrow. You hope so. The merchant has been unreliable since the Tiber flooded last month. Sometimes you dream of owning a Horium, a private grain warehouse. Not a large one, just a single room near the river with dry walls and a good lock. If you could buy grain in bulk when prices drop, you could avoid the markets, save coin, maybe even expand. But that is only a dream, and dreams are too light for a baker. You work in weight. The rhythm of Rome. The city is noisy now. Outside, carts rumble over stone. Street vendors call out prices for fruit and chickpeas. A procession of some kind passes by, a local magistrate perhaps, or a religious guild. The crowd swells, pauses, thins. A boy runs into your shop barefoot, out of breath. He asks for 2 small loaves, for his master's journey. He doesn't name the master and you don't ask. You wrap the loaves in cloth, accept the coin, and send him on his way. You've learned that Rome runs on quiet transactions. The real power moves early, moves lightly, and leaves no trace. By noon, your third batch begins. These are for the late workers, the laborers from the brickfields, the porters from the markets, the women who rise late because they worked through the night washing linens. You have a special bread for them, heavier, filled with crushed lentils and bits of onion. It smells stronger, lasts longer. You call it panis rusticus, though you've never worked a farm. The fire watch. When the oven is emptied, you do the most important job of all, fire watch. You sit beside the mouth of the oven and watch the coals die. Slowly, deliberately. You never leave it alone. Fire has consumed too many bakeries in this city. You remember the one across the way, a young couple, only opened a year before, lost everything when their chimney cracked. The fire spread to the timber roof, then to the apartments above. 3 died. A boy, a washerwoman, and the baker's apprentice. The baker survived, but he never rebuilt. So you sit and you wait. The boys rest against the wall. The air cools slowly. The stone releases its heat in long, tired sighs. You drink tepid water from a clay cup and stare at the embers. Even in silence, you are working. When the city eats. Rome eats constantly. The poor in insulae, the priests in temples, the slaves in kitchens, the guards on patrol, the scribes copying scrolls, all of them need bread. And they need it to be there before hunger. You do not speak of pride. You do not speak of legacy. But you think, sometimes, that the empire stands on things like this: the fire beneath the city, the men and women who rise early and burn quietly so others may live. And as the last embers fade into ash and the oven finally rests, you breathe deep, stretch your fingers, and wonder. When the stones of Rome are dust and its temples hollow, will anyone remember the hands that fed it not with gold or glory, but with flour, fire, and patience? It's late now. The sun has shifted across the sky and its golden light creeps down the alley, reaching finally into the doorway of your bakery. The day is almost over, but not quite. The fire is out, the oven cooling slowly like a sleeping animal, still warm to the touch. You sit near the threshold, legs outstretched, hands resting on your knees. Your tunic is dusty with flour. The folds are crusted with ash and sweat. You've changed your sandals 3 times this month. The stones wear them out faster than they used to. Your last loaf is already spoken for. A young girl comes to collect it, no more than 10 years old, with hair tied in a knot and eyes too tired for her age. She carries a woven basket and a few coins, rubbed nearly smooth from years of handling. She says nothing. You nod, take the final round loaf from the rack, still warm, wrapped in cloth. It's a plain loaf scored with your stamp, dusted with a little extra bran because the flour ran low at midday. You don't apologize. She accepts it without complaint, tucks it beneath a rag, and leaves. You watch her climb the hill, basket swinging softly at her side, her shadow stretching long in the late afternoon sun. You don't know her name, but she's been coming twice a week for almost a year. The bread is likely for her family. You've seen her once with a man, once alone. You don't ask. In Rome, people disappear between visits. They're there, then they're not. Bread and dignity. There is dignity in your trade, not celebrated, not gilded, not preserved in marble reliefs, but felt. In the repetition, in the necessity. You do not quote poets or discuss philosophy. You don't own scrolls. Your voice carries no weight in the forum. But you know how to stretch a bag of flour into 80 loaves. You know how to turn a sack of old grain into something that smells like home. You know how to make hard things soft again. And when you walk the street, people nod. They greet you not for who you are, but for what you do. In a city this large, that's enough. The baker's place in Rome. Bakers are not senators. They are not sculptors or soldiers or scribes, but they are everywhere. In every district, on every hill, in every alley and market square. You feed the guards who stand at the city gates. You feed the priests who tend the flame of Vesta. You feed the woman who mends sandals and the boy who sells roasted chickpeas at the corner. Bread links all of them. You think sometimes about what would happen if you stopped, if no baker lit the oven, if no flour was needed, no loaves shaped, no fires fed. The city would last a day, maybe two. Then it would falter. The temples would grow quiet. The schools would close early. The bathhouses would empty. The streets would fill not with shoppers but with the restless hunger of a city unprepared to feed itself. And yet despite this power you are invisible. No laws are passed for your benefit. No feasts are held in your honor. Your trade is regulated, taxed, measured, and forgotten. Your stamp on each loaf is your only monument, a mark in dough gone by sundown. Still you work. Evening bread and memory. You lock up with the same ritual you followed for years. You cover the mixing bowl. You stack the peels. You bank the last ashes and hang the clay stamp on its hook. You nod to the boys who leave quietly, yawning and barefoot. The light fades, and as you close the shutters and bar the door, you think of your father's hands rough, burned, forever dusted in flour. You remember the way he used to test the heat of the oven with the back of his wrist. You do the same now, though your own son prefers to use a pinch of flour on the tile. Things change, but slowly. You walk home along a narrow alley, your steps soft, your limbs sore. You pass 3 other bakeries, all quiet now. You can smell the bread from each. Yours smells slightly sweeter. Maybe it's the wood. Maybe it's just pride. You reach your building, a small room above a carpenter's stall, and climb the stairs slowly. You wash your hands in a shallow basin. The water is cool. Your hands are cracked. The smell of bread lingers. The city is quiet, not silent, never silent, but slower now. You hear a lute in the distance, someone laughing 2 buildings over, the occasional bark of a dog. You close your eyes, and you wonder. When Rome is just ruins, and the Forum filled with grass, will the ghosts of its bakers still rise before dawn, kneading memory into flour, 1 loaf at a time? Story 4. Scribes of the Forum, the boring bureaucrats who held Rome together. You arrive early. Not because anyone told you to know. One watches over the scribes, but because early is safe, quiet, empty of the noise that fills the Forum Romanum by the 3rd hour. You carry nothing ornate. Your tools are modest, a small writing tablet, a bronze stylus with a worn tip, and a waxed leather pouch of ink. Your tunic is clean but simple, your belt stitched by hand. You carry no weapon, command no soldiers, and speak with no loud authority. But you hold the empire in your hands. You are a scriba, a scribe in the service of the Roman state, not a poet, not a philosopher, not even a tax collector. You are something quieter, a record keeper, a legal transcriber, a bureaucrat of the ancient world. And without you, none of this would work. The Forum wakes. By the time the 2nd hour strikes, the Forum is stirring. Merchants arrange their goods on low wooden tables. Advocates gather near the Basilica Julia, speaking quickly in clipped Latin, rehearsing lines of argument. Magistrates arrive flanked by clerks, carrying scrolls under their arms like swords of paper. You take your place on a low bench outside the tabularium, Rome's archive and administrative center. Here, you copy, collate, and annotate records. You log contracts. You transcribe verdicts. You maintain the calendar of hearings and public announcements. It's not dramatic. No one cheers when you arrive. No sculptor chisels your face into relief. But every trial heard, every debt settled, every contract upheld passes first through your hands. Your fingers are ink-stained. Your eyes are tired, but your scrolls are precise. Bureaucracy as foundation. The Roman bureaucracy is vast and invisible. While the Senate debates and the generals conquer, an army of scribes, clerks, cancellarii, and notarii quietly make the empire function. You are not alone. There are hundreds of scribes in Rome. Some serve the Senate, others the praetors or aediles. A few work in private homes for wealthy families who wish to maintain records of inheritances, dowries, or property sales. But most of you work in or around the forum. Your own work focuses on contracts, legal tablets of wax and wood, signed by witnesses, registered in duplicate, and sealed with cord and clay. These are not just business documents, they are the glue of Roman civil life. Marriage agreements, specifying dowry amounts and family obligations. Slave manumissions, documenting a change from property to person. Loan records, sometimes with interest clauses written in the margins. Property deeds, etched in tiny, careful letters with no room for mistakes. Mistakes matter. An error in a name, a numeral, a boundary description, and a lawsuit could follow. A scribe's honesty and clarity are vital. A forged record is a crime, so is losing one. You copy slowly, carefully, you proof your work as you go. You've been trained to write in several scripts: capitalis rustica for speed, uncial for clarity. You do not embellish. The beauty of your work is its precision. And you are paid, if modestly. A few sesterces per day, sometimes more if your magistrate is generous. Occasionally, someone slips you an extra coin to push their record through faster. You decline, or you don't. It depends. You're not a hero, you're a professional. An invisible class. No one talks about scribes in Rome. There are no epic poems about note-takers, but you are everywhere. At the back of the courtroom, transcribing a trial with no pauses. At the temple registry, nodding donations from those too proud to carry coin. At the census office, recording names of those who struggle to pronounce them. In the market stalls, witnessing contracts for borrowed carts or rented goats. You move among the people, but you are not quite of them. You hear confessions, disputes, declarations of love and betrayal. You listen and you write. You remember when you copied the will of a dying widow who gave all her possessions to her slaves. You remember the merchant who forged a debt note. You remember the scribe who lost his job after botching a priesthood application and spelling the candidate's name wrong. No one forgets a scribe's error. The weight of the scroll. You carry a small scroll with you at all times, your libellus privatus, a personal notebook of sorts. Inside, you keep brief notes, snippets of law, deadlines, outstanding requests, a few copied proverbs from Cicero, whom you admire but do not envy. Today, you are tasked with copying a legal appeal. A grain merchant from Ostia claims a tax official has overcharged him. The appeal must be copied in triplicate, one for the magistrate, one for the archives, and one for public posting. You will do it before the sun reaches its peak. If it is not legible, or if the wax seal is smeared, it will be rejected. That means more than embarrassment. It means delay. And delays in Rome cost real coin. You sit beneath a column in the shadow of a statue you've stopped noticing. Your stylus moves with quiet authority. You dip, write, pause, dip again. You hum a little tune, not loudly. And you wonder. If an empire is built on marble and conquest, who keeps the ink from drying and the words from vanishing? The afternoon light is different. It slants low through the gaps between marble columns and gilded statues, casting long, flickering shadows across the forum. The sun heats the paving stones. The dust in the air is warm, golden. You feel it in your throat. Still you write. The appeal from the grain merchant is finished. 3 copies, rolled tightly and sealed with wax. One bears the signum, the official stamp of the praetor urbanus, the magistrate for civil affairs inside the city. You delivered it yourself to the basilica, walking with steady feet across the crowded square, eyes down, scroll held at chest level. A group of equites passed by, Roman knights with fine cloaks and laughing voices. One brushed past you. He did not see you. You stepped aside. That is what a scribe does, steps aside, so the words may remain clear. Inside the tabularium. You return to the tabularium, Rome's great archive. It sits at the edge of the Forum, built into the base of the Capitoline Hill, its stone facade looming above the square like a fortress of memory. Inside, the air is dry and cool. The thick walls protect the records, thousands of them, from fire, weather, and politics. Scrolls are stored in wooden shelves, in cubbies carved into the stone, in clay jars marked with faded names. Here lie the bones of Rome's memory. You walk past rows of these shelves daily. They hold birth registries, tax rolls, slave manumission records, court decisions, Senate decrees. Some scrolls are centuries old, copied and recopied by scribes long gone. Others are fresh ink still wet, parchment still curling. In a quiet room at the rear, you help maintain the album civium, the list of Roman citizens. It is updated each year based on the census. You transcribe names. Each must be perfect. A mistake here doesn't just inconvenience someone. It might strip a person of their rights, their grain ration, their vote. There is a rhythm to it. You check the master list, transcribe the new entries, verify birth certificates, marriage registrations, military records. Sometimes you spot irregularities. A man claiming citizenship who has no parent registered. A child whose father is listed as deceased but who bought a home last year. You report the irregularities, quietly, through proper channels. You do not accuse, you write. The bureaucratic empire. People speak of the legions, their banners, their discipline, their roads stretching across mountains and deserts. But there is another kind of order in Rome, one made not with swords but with scrolls, not shouted but written. The Roman Empire runs on documentation. It has laws for nearly everything: grain weight, sewer maintenance, slave sale procedures, street repair funds. Every transaction, every ruling, every grain shipment and building permit is documented. And every document needs a scribe. You work with others, dozens of them seated at low desks or stone benches, heads bowed, eyes narrowed, hands stained with ink. You know each other's coughs, the squeak of each other's styluses, the soft curses when a drop of sweat smudges a line. There is no competition, only precision. Some scribes work faster, some write with better hand. One man, Claudius, at the far bench can copy a will in under an hour. Another, Felix, once caught a forged property sale hidden inside a bundle of routine contracts. He was offered a clerkship in the magistrate's office. You congratulated him, then returned to your page. Not every scribe stays forever. Some move into law. Some become clerks for senators. A few, trusted for their discretion, serve as private secretaries for wealthy patricians. Fewer still become nodara, shorthand writers who serve in trials and record speeches in real time, a rare and valued skill. But most remain here, in the Forum, in the shadows of power, keeping the lines straight. What you learn but never say. You've learned things by listening, by watching, by copying. You know which merchant is quietly selling grain above the legal price. You know which magistrate issued conflicting land grants to two families. You know which will was altered after the fact, the ink fresher, the seal clumsy. But you say nothing. That is the burden and the badge of a scribe: silence. If people could not trust you to keep the state's secrets, they would not let you write them down. You hold your power not in voice, but in restraint. Sometimes you wonder if any of the words you write will matter in 100 years. Will the appeal of the grain merchant still sit in a jar? Will the album civium still list the name of a child born this year? Maybe not, but someone will have copied them. Someone will have done what you do now. And that is enough. Outside again. You step outside as the sun lowers toward the rooftops. The shadows stretch longer now. The Forum is thinning. Advocates argue in lower voices. Market stalls begin to close. The marble columns glow pale orange. You carry a wax tablet in your hand, notes for tomorrow's hearing on a property dispute in the Subura. 2 brothers, 1 roof, 3 claims. It will not be resolved quickly, but it will be recorded. As you cross the square, a child chases a ball past your feet. You stop it with your sandal, smile slightly, and roll it back. The child runs on. You watch for a moment. The city continues. And you think, when Rome forgets its own stories, who will copy them down again not as glory, but as proof that once someone cared enough to write it all down? The room is quiet now. The forum has emptied. The dust has settled on the marble steps. The shadows lie long across the paving stones, and the temples so grand in daylight seem softer now, their columns fading into evening. You remain inside at your desk. The wax lamp flickers on a bronze stand. The air smells faintly of oil and old paper. The tabularium is nearly silent, just the occasional shuffle of sandals or the whisper of a scroll being reshelved. Most scribes have gone. A few linger, finishing last-minute entries or preparing for tomorrow's hearings. You stay because the record must be finished. Today's final task, the certification of a land boundary dispute, 2 families, 4 neighbors, a dozen witnesses. The outcome will shape the borders of a vineyard near Tiber and the taxes it will pay. You didn't attend the hearing, but you transcribed the ruling, carefully, word by word, line by line. The ink is thick tonight, the parchment dry. Custodian of words. This is the part few see, the hours after the law is spoken, when it must be made real. A decision is not valid until written, not legitimate until copied, not preserved until stored. What you do is not simply writing, it is waiting time. A spoken sentence fades, a carved command weathers, but a copied scroll kept in a sealed jar, registered in 3 locations, written in 2 hands and witnessed by 4, that lasts. That is why the res publica, the public thing, the Roman state trusts you. Not with armies, not with taxes, with something older, the keeping of memory. You've seen 100 names this week. Farmers, merchants, freedmen, women, widows, children, slaves granted freedom, senators passing rulings, priests listing rituals. Their lives are now on record, not as stories but as facts. That is your domain, not myth, not praise, not epics or elegy, but fact. And facts written well survive everything. The decay of memory. You've seen scrolls crumble, not the new ones, they're sealed, protected, copied, but the old ones. The Republic's records curled with age, the ink faded to a whisper. Sometimes a name vanishes from them entirely. Sometimes the date is smudged. Sometimes you hold a scroll and realize you are the last person who will ever read this. It is humbling and sad, but not tragic. Nothing lasts forever, not marble, not statues, not cities. But if a scroll survives even 50 years, if a verdict prevents a feud, or a name proves a birthright, or a contract saves a home, then the work mattered. And if no one remembers the scribe, that's fine. The point was never to be remembered, it was to remember for others. At the edge of the empire, you've heard tales of far provinces, Syria, Gaul, Mauritania, where scribes like you work in military outposts, in governors' halls, in dusty temples. They write in Latin or Greek or local dialects. They translate laws. They keep records of tax harvests, garrison numbers, village disputes. You've never traveled, but you imagine them there by lamplight, copying decisions you helped draft. Across mountains and deserts, your handwriting, your format, your structure may shape how a land is ruled. And when the empire eventually falters, as all things do, perhaps a clay jar buried under stone will break open, and someone will read your words. Not your name, just your work. And that will be enough. The closing line. You finish the land ruling. You dust the ink with crushed pumice to dry it. You roll the parchment, tie it with thin twine, and seal it with wax. You press the tabularium stamp, a winged helmet, the mark of state approval, into the seal. It is done. You stretch your fingers, your joints ache. Your sight blurs slightly at the edges, But the record is clean, precise, permanent. You extinguish the lamp. The scrolls are returned to their place. The doors are barred behind you. Outside, the stars are already visible between rooftops. You walk home in silence, past fountains trickling, past guards on duty, past temples where incense still burns in the night air. You pass a wall where graffiti scrawls declare love and elections in simple curses. Those words will fade soon. Rain will wash them away. But yours tucked in the tabularium, dry, sealed, dull to behold but flawless in form, will last. And you wonder, when the last column falls and the city sleeps for good, will anyone open a scroll and say, this is how they lived? Story 5. The public bath, steam, soap, and social hierarchies. You step out of the sun and into the mist. The first thing that hits you is the air, warm, dense, humid. It curls around your arms, settles against your skin, and fills your nostrils with the smell of water, oil, and stone. You blink against the dim light as the world of the thermi surrounds you. This is not a palace, not a temple, but here, under curved ceilings and tiled walls, Rome breathes together. You are not a senator. You are not a slave. You are something in between: a freedman who owns a small spice stall near the Porta Capena. You have calluses on your palms and a stiff left ankle from an accident 2 winters ago. You rise early, work hard, and earn just enough to bathe most afternoons. Not at the thermi of Caracalla, those are for the city's grand rituals, but here, at the neighborhood bathhouse, the balneum. It's not small. Nothing in Rome is small. The ceilings are tall. The rooms echo with footsteps and water. The walls are lined with mosaic, faded but still bright in the steam. The place hums with quiet voices, the slap of sandals on wet floors, and the distant sound of bronze strigils scraping oil from skin. You nod to the attendant, hand over your quadrans, a cheap copper coin, and enter. The order of cleansing. The Roman bath is a journey. You do not simply walk in and splash water on your face. There is a ritual and order to be followed. You begin in the apoditerium, the changing room. It is a wide space with niches in the walls for clothes and benches lining the sides. Here, men undress quickly, efficiently. Tunics are folded, sandals removed, belts and pouches tucked into the wall slots. Theft is rare but not unheard of. You've seen arguments here, shouts, accusations, even a punch or two. But today is quiet. A capsarius, a boy servant who watches the clothes, offers you a small strip of cloth to wear. You take it and nod. It's more courtesy than modesty. In the bath, everyone is equal, or so they say. Next comes the tepidarium, the warm room. The temperature rises slowly. The walls sweat. Your skin begins to open. This is the transition, the softening of the self. You sit on a stone bench, breathing deeply. The heat is not intense yet, just a slow rise like a tide. Around you, others sit silently or speak in low voices: politics, shop gossip, family matters. A father gently scolds a child for fidgeting. 2 older men debate a gladiator's performance last week at the arena. There is something meditative here. The city's noise is outside. Inside, there is only warmth. Into the fire. You rise and move to the caldarium, the hot room. It is hotter than before, properly hot. The floor is warm beneath your feet, heated from below by the hypocaust, a system of raised tiles and channels where fire circulates beneath the surface. Slaves tend the furnaces at the rear of the complex. You never see them, only the heat they create. In the center of the room is a round basin, the labrum, filled with hot water. Steam curls from its surface. You lower yourself in slowly. The shock is immediate. Your skin burns, then adjusts. You exhale through your nose, lean back, and let the heat sink into your joints. This is why you come. Not for luxury, not for pleasure, for relief. The pain in your ankle dulls. The tension in your shoulders eases. Your back, tight from carrying crates, begins to loosen. You close your eyes. You do not linger too long. The heat is draining. You emerge, dripping, and move to the strigil station. There a unctors and oil man rubs your arms and legs with scented olive oil. It is a thin film, not luxurious. Then, with a bronze strigil curved like a blunt knife, he scrapes it off, along with sweat, dirt, and the dust of the street. It makes a wet, rasping sound. He works efficiently, his eyes never meeting yours. He is focused. When he finishes, you thank him, drop a coin into a bowl, and step aside. You feel lighter, cleaner, renewed. Not just a bath. The thermi are more than cleanliness. They are Rome's meeting ground, not just physically, but socially. Here you can sit beside a merchant, a minor official, a foreign guest, or a poor poet. Status exists, but it's muted. Everyone is stripped down to skin, oil, and sweat. Voices echo the same. Names carry less weight when spoken in steam. You know this. You've seen magistrates nod politely to butchers. You've seen old men offer advice to boys. You've seen arguments resolved with a handshake in the tepidarium. Of course, there is still hierarchy. The elite bathe at different hours. Their attendants bring towels, perfumes, even wine. But even so, for a brief time, this place is level. It is, in a way, the only place in Rome where a man like you can be seen without being judged. The return to cold. You finish in the frigidarium, the cold room. The water is icy and you descend quickly, not to suffer but to close the pores. It's the final step, a shock to the system, a reset. The noise is louder here, laughter, splashing. Children are allowed in the cold room. A boy cannonballs into the pool and is scolded gently by an older man. A group of soldiers lean against the wall, speaking of leave and missed home-cooked meals. You do not speak. You sit waist-deep, letting the cold settle your heartbeat. After a moment you rise, pat yourself dry with a rough cloth, and return to the apoditerium. Your clothes are still there. The capsarius nods. Nothing has been taken. You dress slowly. Your tunic feels strange on your newly cleaned skin, lighter, looser, as if you'd left something behind in the water. Outside, the sun is lower in the sky. The streets are louder now, carts, shouting, the clang of bronze. You re-enter the world of Rome carrying less. And you wonder. When all of Rome's monuments crumble, and its emperors fade into legend, will the last memory be not of marble, but of water and the places where the city came to breathe together, for just a while? The baths are full today. You arrive at the third hour late morning and the balneum is already humming, not just with heat but with people. The caldarium roars with conversation. The frigidarium echoes with splashes and laughter. The apoditerium is packed shoulder to shoulder, tunics folded, sandals stacked, voices thick with gossip and business. This is the social hour. Bathing in Rome is not merely about getting clean. It is performance. It is presence. It is being seen or deliberately unseen. Who you bathe with when you arrive, how long you stay, these are statements. Today you watch carefully. The subtle signals of status. At the far end of the changing room, a senator's son, you know his face, though not his name, is undressing with the aid of a slave. The youth barely glances at his clothes. The slave folds each item with care and stores them in a private cubby. A second slave stands by with a towel and a vial of imported perfume. You, by contrast, roll your tunic yourself and slide it between two stones, wedging it tight so it won't fall. You tie your coin pouch around your ankle with a frayed cord. It's a small difference, but you notice it, everyone does. In the tepidarium, you sit on a bench beside a man who smells faintly of iron and sweat, a blacksmith by his hands. His elbows are raw, his nails are black, but he bathes like a patrician, confidently, silently. The man beside him wears rings and speaks of his villa in Tibur. Neither acknowledges the other. That's Rome's shared water, separate worlds. Politics and posture. As you enter the caldarium, the air thickens. The mist is dense, and the heat hits like a wave. You sit at the edge of the basin, feet dangling in the water, watching. A small group speaks in low tones at the far wall, a former magistrate, a grain supplier, and a younger man with the stooped posture of a clerk. Their conversation is slow, deliberate, and full of pauses. You can't hear much over the steam and echoes, but you catch the words annona and tax, grain talk, someone being paid, someone else is being promised something. This too is a function of the bath, the quiet deal, the veiled favor, the question that sounds like a joke and the laugh that means agreement. You wonder how many laws were shaped in this very room, not voted on, shaped, nudged, whispered, arranged. The workers beneath. Beneath this room, literally beneath it, are the ones who make it work. The hypocaustum is tended by slaves. You never see them, but you feel their work in every breath. They feed the fires, shovel the coals, clear the ash. They sweat in the dark, surrounded by heat that never cools, breathing in soot so others can sit in luxury. Some of them die young. Their names are not known. If they're lucky, they are buried with a simple plaque, Servus balne, qui calorum portavit, bath slave who carried the heat. You think of them sometimes when you sit on the warm bench. Not always, but today the thought lingers. Soap, oil, and the smell of the city. There is no soap here, not like you know it today. Rome bathes with olive oil mixed with herbs, or in some cases, perfumed with imported scents from Syria or Egypt. The wealthy bring their own oils. The poor rely on the bathhouse supply, thin, gritty, sometimes slightly rancid if left too long. You prefer the plain kind. You rub it on your arms, your shoulders, across your chest. A bath servant hands you a bronze strigil, dulled from years of use. You scrape slowly, gently, collecting the dirt and oil into a thick paste, which you wipe on a cloth before rinsing. The process is methodical. You know your own skin. You know the pattern of old scars, the calluses, the spots that still ache from an accident years ago. Bathing is a form of inventory, a way of keeping track of what time has done to you. When finished, you sit quietly. You don't talk, some men do. They share stories, gossip, complaints. You listen but speak little. There is a kind of dignity in stillness. Gendered waters. You think of your wife, who bathes at a different hour early morning before the men arrive. Women have their own schedule in many bathhouses. Some are co-ed at different times, others strictly segregated. The rules shift from one neighborhood to another and depend on who funds the baths. Her bath experience is different, quieter, more private, fewer deals, fewer displays, but still public. She told you once that she likes the frigidarium best. The cold clears her mind. You smile at the thought. The cost of cleanliness. Bathing is not free, though cheap. A few quadrants, perhaps a semis, half an as at the larger complexes. Enough for most working men to afford a visit 2 or 3 times a week. Daily, if work is steady. Some cities offer free admission on festival days. Others, like Rome, sometimes subsidize the baths with public funds. A wealthy patron might sponsor free bathing for a week in honor of a relative's birthday. When that happens, the lines grow long, but no one complains. Cleanliness is seen as a civic virtue. To be dirty is not just unpleasant, it is un-Roman. Of course, not all bathe. There are those too poor, too sick, too far. But in Rome, if you can bathe, you do. The unspoken closeness. You leave the caldarium and head for the cold plunge. You pass a man you saw last week. You nod. He nods back. You do not speak. You've never spoken. But you've seen each other in steam, stripped down to skin and fatigue. That counts for something. In a city this large, moments of recognition matter. You step into the frigidarium. The cold hits you like glass. You gasp but do not retreat. You submerge and then breathe. When you emerge, clean and shivering, the attendant hands you a towel. You dry off. You dress. You step out into the light of late afternoon. And as the wind brushes across your skin, you think. When Rome's Forum falls quiet and her statues crack, will anyone remember the rooms where strangers became familiar and sweat was traded for stillness? It's late afternoon now, and the sun casts a golden haze across Rome. You've bathed, dressed, and stepped back into the noisy street. The sounds of Rome press in around you again, the creak of cart wheels, the scolding of vendors, the thud of sandals on stone. But something clings to you, a sense of stillness from the steam, a memory of warmth. You carry it with you as you walk. Your limbs are looser. The ache in your back has softened. The sweat and grit of work are gone, washed away in the caldarium, scraped off by the strigil, rinsed in cold water. But what remains, what the bath cannot wash away, is the place the baths hold in your life. They are not a luxury, they are a necessity, a point of return, a clock without hands, a station in the daily circuit of survival. A city of steam. Rome has hundreds of balnea and thermae, from humble, one-room establishments nestled in alleys to massive complexes like the baths of Trajan, of Nero, of Caracalla. Each offers heat, cold, rest, cleansing, but each also mirrors the structure of Rome itself, ordered, tiered, and coded. At the larger complexes, you might find gardens, libraries, gymnasia, lecture halls. Some even host performances, readings, or political debates. The baths of Caracalla can hold thousands of people at once, an entire city within a city, humming with voices, scents, footfalls on polished stone. The marble is cool, the ceiling soar. Statues of gods, athletes, and past emperors look down on the bathers. There is pride in such places, grandeur. But you, like many others, prefer your neighborhood bath. It's not fancy, the walls are cracked, the mosaics faded, but it's clean, reliable, and known. You know the attendant, you recognize the regulars, you know which bench is warmest. You trust the oil not to be too watered down. There is comfort in routine. Baths and belonging. In the empire's vast machinery, baths are more than buildings, they are the soft connective tissue between Rome's muscle and bone. They serve as neutral ground where classes may blur and reestablish themselves in unexpected ways. Here, slaves and citizens share space. Wealthy merchants may nod to retired soldiers. Foreigners bathe beside native Romans. For a moment, not in law, but in posture, everyone is equal in steam. It is a theater of the ordinary. Of course, social rules still apply. Certain hours belong to certain people. Certain spaces feel claimed. But the edge is gentler here, less sharp. A little heat, a little sweat, and people soften. Arguments are sometimes resolved at the baths. So are friendships begun, political alliances hinted at. Sometimes a magistrate happens to run into a client in the tepidarium. Nothing official is said, but something changes afterward. This is how Rome works, not just with laws and swords, but with murmurs over water. The price of warmth. Not everyone can afford the bath regularly. For some, the cost of admission, modest though it is, must be weighed against food, rent, clothing, wine. But the state often subsidizes bathing, and many baths are free on holidays. In provinces far from Rome, bathing culture spreads slowly. In Gaul, in Britannia, in North Africa, bathhouses are built, but not always embraced. Some people mistrust the communal exposure. Others simply lack the water. But in Rome, water is status, and to be clean is to be Roman. And as Rome ages, its infrastructure, its aqueducts, cisterns, furnaces, and hypocausts will stretch and crack. Fires will damage roofs. Earthquakes will split tiles. Pipes will rust. But the desire to bathe will remain. Even when the empire weakens, when soldiers stop getting paid, when governors cheat their provinces and bricks crumble from public buildings, people will still gather at the baths. The last warmth of a declining city may well be steam rising from a cracked dome, as a few tired bodies lean back in a cooling pool and remember what it felt like to belong. The long view. You return home at twilight. The streets are fuller now, shops closing, taverns opening, children running home with crusts of bread or bits of fruit. The smell of lentils drifts from windows. Someone plays a reed pipe on a balcony. You pass the door of a balneater, a retired bath attendant. He sits on a stool, polishing his oil flask, humming. You nod. He nods back. You reach your apartment and climb the stairs. They creak. They always do. You set down your bag, light a small oil lamp, and wash your hands again, not from dirt, but from habit. And you think. You think of all the things the bath has washed away. Your anger, your fatigue, your worry. You think of what it gave back, not wealth, not power, but presence. A feeling of being known, if only to the water. And you wonder, when the empire fades and its temples lie open to the wind, will a cracked mosaic still remember the feet that passed across it, chasing not luxury, but simple warmth? Story 6. Street vendors and the smell of empire. You wake to sound. Not birdsong, not bells, but to the calls of men in the street. The butcher's boy is shouting, "Fresh liver, fresh heart, still warm." The fishmonger yells back, "Eels from the Tiber, still squirming." And somewhere deeper in the chaos, a soft chant rises above it all. Spiced nuts, hot from the pan, figs, dried sweet, sesame bread. You are in Rome, you are hungry, and the city knows it. The street as stomach. The streets of Rome are not just thoroughfares. They are kitchens, pantries, restaurants. Food is not confined to homes or inns, it is everywhere, and it begins early. You are not rich, just another tenant in a crowded insula. Your apartment smells faintly of oil and last night's stew. You dress quickly, tuck a few asses into your belt, and head out. You don't plan to cook today. Most Romans don't. Apartments rarely have ovens. Fires are dangerous. Kitchens are small. For the working class, home cooking is rare. Instead, they rely on the vendedores, ambulance, the hawkers, pushers, shouters, and carriers of food. They fill every corner of the morning. The corners of streets, the arches of alleys, the edges of the forum. You make your way through them. Vendors of the ordinary. First, the panis pistoris, the bread sellers. Their loaves are round, scored with lines marked by the bakery's stamp. You see yesterday's crumbs in the folds of the vendor's toga. He sells loaves still warm from the communal ovens. Cheap, dense, filling. Beside him, a woman sells mortem, a garlic cheese spread pounded with herbs. She offers a smear on a crust, wrapped in a leaf. Farther on, a pool's vendor stirs a cauldron of barley porridge with dried onions. He looks half asleep, his ladle moving slow circles. A beggar leans nearby, sniffing. You pass a young boy with a tray of dates soaked in wine, sprinkled with ground almonds. His feet are bare. His smile is wide. Every scent competes: honey, vinegar, salt, smoke, citrus, fried dough. Rome doesn't just smell like an empire, it tastes like one. Cilicia in the garum, Gaul in the wine, Egypt in the grain, Syria in the cinnamon. The rhythm of hunger. Rome runs on a flexible stomach. The poor eat early, simple, fast and standing. Bread with olives, lentils in a cup, stew from a cart. The wealthy dine late, reclining, multiple courses, rare spices, servants to peel grapes. But the vendors bridge that gap. They feed everyone. Even a senator might buy roasted chickpeas on a walk to the forum. Even a slave might save up for a honey cake on Saturnalia. You stop at a stand selling libum, a soft cheese bread, slightly sweet. The vendor wraps it in a fig leaf and hands it to you without a word. It is warm. You tear a piece off slowly. As you chew, a soldier walks by, laughing with a baker. Two prostitutes argue over a stolen apple. A child chases a runaway cabbage. A dog darts past with a scrap of meat in its jaws. And above it all, the vendors call out, never silent, never still. Their voices rise, fall, echo between walls. Permits, politics, and public space. Of course, it's not all free. Vendors need permission technically. The aediles, minor magistrates, regulate public order. That includes stalls, weights and measures, sanitation. A crooked scale might get you fined. A bad spot might get you moved. Some vendors pay protection, unofficial but understood. A coin to a guard, a gift to a clerk. It keeps the prime corners in good hours. Others operate in the shadows. No license, no stamp, just a tray, 2 feet, and a sharp eye for patrols. The politics of space are constant. Who stands where, who moves when, who shouts loudest. It's more choreography than law, a shifting, swirling dance of deals and glances. You've seen fights over turf. One vendor accused another of watering his wine. A third claimed stolen recipes. Another bribed a drunk to knock over a competitor's brazier. Rome may be full of emperors, generals, philosophers, but here on the cobbles the bread seller is king. The vendor's tools. Their setups are simple, ingenious. Some carry trays strapped around their necks, loaded with pastries. Others balance baskets on their heads full of fruit. The soup vendors roll carts, wooden boxes with bronze cauldrons and a coal pan beneath. Smoke drifts from the vents, a hole in the side for spoons. Drink sellers carry jugs on poles, clinking with cups. They sell water with vinegar, pasca, honeyed wine, mulsum, or simple barley tea. And then there are the friars' thermopolia, small street shops with a counter, jars sunken into stone, steam rising from the surface. They sell stew, meatballs, boiled eggs, cabbage, sausage, lentils, leeks, hot and cheap. You pass one now. The cook grins, his apron is filthy, his pot smells wonderful. You make a note to return at midday. A world in motion. The food is everywhere, but it doesn't sit still. Vendors move, customers move, Rome moves, a constant tide of trade, noise, taste, and smell. Every alley has a flavor, every hour a scent. And as you finish your cheese bread and wipe your hands, you realize the vendors know you. Not your name, maybe, but your face, your hunger, your habits. They know you like soft bread, not hard crust, that you hate onions, that you pay in full but never tip. They remember. And tomorrow they'll call to you again. Their voices are the heartbeat of the street, the endless morning cry of an empire built not just on conquest or marble, but on food handed over hot, wrapped in leaves, and eaten while walking. And you wonder, when Rome's palaces crumble and her temples are dust, will anyone still remember the shout that meant breakfast? You return to the street later in the day as the sun climbs higher and the air thickens with heat and voices. Morning's chill has lifted, the shade under balconies shrinks, and the rhythm of Rome's hunger changes. The early food, the bread, the porridge, the nuts begins to fade. In their place, the city turns toward lunch. It's not a feast, not for most, but it's necessary and the streets prepare. Thermopolia, Rome's food counters. You walk past your local thermopolium, one of hundreds across the city. It's not large, just a small shopfront carved into the ground floor of a tall insula, with a stone counter shaped in a lazy L. Inside the counter are jars sunk deep into the stone, each one sealed with a wooden lid. Steam curls from the gaps. Behind the counter stands a man named Crispus. You don't know if it's his real name. He's lean, balding, wears a stained tunic, and never smiles unless a magistrate walks by. You've seen him yell at children, flirt with drunkards, bribe a clerk, swat a rat with his ladle, and sell watered wine with the confidence of Cicero. He nods at you today, a sign of peace. He knows you like his lentils. What's for sale? Lunch food is simple, portable, filling, above all hot. Crispus opens his clay jar and ladles you a scoop of lentil stew lens cum alio. It's thick with garlic, studded with diced onion, and smells of bay leaf and pepper. He sprinkles ground coriander on top. You pay a single as a fair price. He gives you a piece of bread for dipping. You eat standing, leaning against the building. Around you others eat, 2 standing, squatting, talking, silent. A cobbler, a messenger boy, a woman with 3 children, a group of laborers in dust-caked tunics, quiet and sunburnt. Their hands are cracked but steady. Their coins are counted twice. Lunch is not a social hour, it's a pause, a refill, a gathering of strength. Drink to wash it down. You buy a cup of Pascha sour wine mixed with vinegar and water. It tastes strange at first, but it quenches thirst and doesn't spoil in the sun. Soldiers swear by it. So do slaves. The cup is metal communal, passed from hand to hand, rinsed only sometimes. You wipe the rim before drinking. Everyone does. It's a ritual of caution, not courtesy. Others choose mulsum, wine spiced with honey and herbs served warm. It costs more. Fewer hands touch it. Competition and corner fights. Not far from Crispus's stall is another food seller, Lupa, a widow who sells grilled sausage and boiled cabbage from a cart with cracked wheels. The two vendors eye each other daily. They do not speak, but they watch. Last month a fight broke out. A customer claimed the sausage was undercooked. Lupa blamed the meat supplier. The supplier blamed the heat. A small brawl broke out. No one was seriously hurt, but since then the corner has been quieter. This is Rome. Every block has its history. Food vendors compete in silence, in scents, in smiles, in shadowy bribes. A single step closer to the street's center may bring more customers. A single insult may bring a visit from the ediles. Some vendors survive through cunning, others through kindness, and some simply because they've always been there. Sweet things and symbols. After lunch, the sweet vendors appear. Boys selling honey cakes, men with sesame wafers stacked in baskets, women with trays of candied dates and dried fig rolls wrapped in palm leaves. Children gather first, then women, then slaves sent by wealthier families. One man sells almond pastries shaped like birds. They're symbols of luck, especially during festivals. You buy a fig roll. It's too sweet and sticks to your teeth. But it reminds you of your mother. She used to make something like it in a different city long ago. You don't think of her often, but today you do. Behind the counter, some vendors live above their stalls. Others sleep in the shop, curled on sacks of flour or baskets of fruit. They rise before dawn, boil water over coal, prep sauces, sharpen knives. They haul goods from the port or the forum market. They argue with suppliers, sweet-talk guards, clean jars, chase flies. There is no rest, no slow days. Every hour not selling is a lost coin. Many are immigrants, freed slaves from Syria, traders from the Levant, cooks from Crete. Their accents mark them. Some customers avoid them. Others seek them out for specific flavors: garlicky eggplant, cumin stew, spiced chickpea cakes. Rome feeds on empire, and the street vendors are its cooks. A moment of stillness. You finish your fig roll and look up. The sun has passed the zenith. The shade is spreading again. The city begins to shift toward its second rhythm: late afternoon business, evening conversation, night hunger. But for now, there is a pause. Crispus wipes his counter. A beggar dozes in the alley. The sausage cart rattles off down the lane. And you sit, just for a moment, in the warmth of a street corner where the smell of boiled lentils still lingers, and wonder. How many emperors sat on golden thrones while a man like Crispus stirred his stew, unseen and unpraised, yet feeding the empire one bowl at a time. Evening begins softly in Rome. It doesn't arrive all at once, but creeps in through shutter cracks, across tiled roofs, between the pillars of porticos. The sky darkens from white to amber, then to bruised purple. The heat ebbs from the stones. Shadows stretch long. And the vendors change. The early morning criers, the lentil stirrers, the sausage hawkers, many have packed up. Their voices are hoarse. Their trays are lighter. Some count coins, others count losses. But the night has its own appetite, and a different kind of food. You remain on the street. You have no banquet to attend, no slaves to prepare a meal, no invitation to a patron's table. So you do what thousands of Romans do each night. You find something hot, something cheap, something good enough to quiet the stomach until morning. The night grillers. From a narrow alley comes the crackle of charcoal. The scent of meat fat, smoke, garlic, pepper wraps itself around you like a cloak. There he is, the night griller. You don't know his name. No one does. He says little. He wears a blackened apron, a soot-covered cap. He works a brazier set into an old wine cart modified to hold heat. On his grill, strips of lamb hiss. Small birds plucked, salted turned slowly on skewers. He brushes them with oil crusted with herbs. You buy a skewer of liver still pink at the center. You eat it slowly, standing. The juices drip onto the stones. This food is rougher, stronger, made for laborers and drunkards, for gladiators and night watchmen, for those who work late or cannot sleep. Drink for the sleepless. Next to the grill, a boy offers cups of warmed Mulsum wine with honey and crushed rosemary. He serves it from a bronze pot with a dented ladle. The cups are clay, mismatched. He rinses each in a bucket that looks like it hasn't been changed since yesterday. But the wine is sweet and the heat cuts the edge of night. You drink slowly. Others drink quickly. A man in a soldier's cloak gulps 3 cups and stumbles off laughing. A girl with a tired face and painted eyes sips one in silence, watching the flames. The griller never looks up. He flips the skewers again. Food for the forgotten. A beggar sits near the corner, legs stretched, head bowed. His feet are wrapped in cloth. His hands tremble. He doesn't beg with words. He just sits, quiet, watching the food. You've seen him before. He never asks. Sometimes he's fed. Tonight, the boy with the wine gives him a burnt piece of flatbread, silently. This is how Rome feeds its forgotten, not by policy, but by momentary mercy. A burnt scrap, a crust, a leftover skewer dropped accidentally. No one applauds, no one remembers. But it happens. Voices in the dark. Further down, the vendors with voices return. A woman sells roasted nuts from a basket warmed with a stone. She sings softly, not to sell, but to fill the silence. A man juggles fried dough on a tray, flipping them with a stick, laughing when one drops and a dog steals it. Even now, even in twilight, they are still working, not because they must, but because if they don't, they fall behind. There's no pension for a vendor, no safety net. Every missed hour is a missed meal. So they stay out, until the street is empty, until the lamps are out, until the dogs roam free and the rats reclaim the gutters. Then and only then do they pack their trays and carts and baskets. Then and only then do they go home if they have one. The final scent. The last thing you smell before returning home is garum fermented fish sauce, sharp and metallic. Someone's cooking stewed vegetables with it. You turn toward the scent, see a tiny window above a shop with a bowl resting on its sill, steam rising. You wonder what it tastes like. You wonder who lives there. You wonder what they paid for that fish sauce, shipped from Hispania in an amphora sealed with resin. Rome's smell is not perfume. It's not roses or incense. It is sour wine, fried leeks, sweat, meat smoke, garlic, vinegar, baked bread, and ash. And somehow it smells like home. You return to your apartment. The stairwell is dark. You light a tiny oil lamp and climb. Your room is small. The window is cracked. The bedding is rough. But you are full. And as you lie back, you think of all the hands that fed you today. All the lives that touched yours through a ladle or skewer or song. You never learned their names. And they never learned yours. But you wonder, if Rome is ever found again buried beneath ash or dirt, will anyone recognize its greatness not by its emperors, but by the burnt crusts and spiced wine sold to strangers in the dark?